So everywhere we look today in the world, people are going to be talking about artificial intelligence and how it's changing the world. But with any kind of new technology like this, there are going to be the attackers, the bad guys, who will want to abuse and misuse it as well. So here's the question, how secure are our AIs? We are moving fast, but are we also breaking things? Hi, I am Balázs, and in this series of videos, I'm going to be looking at the many ways attackers can compromise AIs and machine learning in general. But let's start with the good stuff. So I'm sure that people have heard about AIs beating humans at various games, whether we are talking about board games or even computer games such as StarCraft 2, which is a real-time strategy game. And in this particular case, an AI developed by DeepMind called AlphaStar managed to beat the #1 human player in the world 5-0. Though of course it has to be mentioned that in the exhibition match the human did manage to beat the machine by using some tactics that were pretty much unexpected. But let's go towards something a bit more serious. AI is very helpful, for example, when dealing with science. Obviously, AI is not going to become better scientists than humans, but AI is very useful in assisting humans in science. Whether we are talking about medical science, such as diagnosing people, or biology, such as protein folding, or even astronomy, helping researchers learn more about the universe, such as modeling black holes, which is a real success story from this year, where an AI was used to significantly improve the image quality of some pictures, which could be then used to learn more about a black hole. Though, of course, we still have to mention that there were some cases where such an AI could misdiagnose a person, which, as you can guess, has some pretty bad consequences. Now, we can also say that AI is pretty good at doing things that normally only humans are supposed to do. So, things like perceiving the human world, and even driving cars and other vehicles automatically and autonomously. And also reading text and even understanding what's in the text or pretending to understand what's in the text, and sometimes even writing its own text for other humans to read. It can even be said that maybe AIs can create art, though this is a pretty contentious topic, though I have to say that at least DALL-E was able to generate me a picture of a cat driving a car, so that's pretty close to art, I think. But more seriously, this is a very controversial area. There's a lot of discussion about whether AIs can do stuff that humans can do. This is a little bit out of scope for us. The one thing I will say is that, of course, lying is also something humans do. So if AIs can do that, I mean, that's just another thing where they are getting closer to humans. And we should also say that AI can also write code, which is, well, as developers should give us some pause, because if we ask an AI to write some code for a particular function, it will very, very happily do that for us. And in this particular case, I asked ChatGPT to generate me some code about verifying that the username and password were following best practices according to the current best practices. And in just a few seconds, it has generated me the code that you see here. And on first glance, this code looks perfectly fine. I mean, it does what it's supposed to do. It does check that the password, for example, is long enough. And it also checks that the email address matches this regular expression. But if we look a little bit deeper, there's going to be some questionable decisions made in this code. We can notice, for example, that all of these requirements about having to have an uppercase character, a lowercase character, and so on in a password is actually not really recommended anymore. In fact, it goes against current best practices when it comes to passwords. And similarly, that regular expression on the right is pretty good at capturing typical email addresses, but somebody can come up with an email address that doesn't match this regular expression, but is still completely valid. In fact, these kinds of email addresses are in use by some of the largest email providers in the world. So yes, there are some imperfections. But let's move on from here and see where these imperfections actually become a security problem. So, we have seen that AI is pretty good at solving certain types of problems, but can still make mistakes. So why is that? Well, we have to look into the process in how we teach an AI to do a particular task, so machine learning. And there are some issues and challenges in machine learning that have been known for decades at this point. For example, overfitting, which is the problem of teaching a model with a particular kind of input data, and it is going to be very good at working with that kind of data, but may become overly used to certain characteristics of that data and become unable to generalize to other similar data that it should also be able to process. For example, in the bottom left, you can see an example from a study where they have used classifiers that were trained on ImageNet, which is a pretty well-known set of images, to recognize shapes. And in this particular case, all of these images contain a mongoose. And the model was very good at being able to pick out mongooses in this particular case from those images. But when they reproduced this set of images in a completely different setting from different sources, so there were similar things on the photos, but they were not arranged in exactly the same way, the model was no longer able to detect the mongooses. So there was a significant decrease in effectiveness, in accuracy when it came to the model. So that's one of the problems. Then we also have catastrophic forgetting, which is in a neural network. As we are training the neural network, it may forget certain connections, and so it may become unable to recognize certain things the more we train it. And finally, the biggest problem that is also pretty well known is garbage in, garbage out, which is essentially the problem of training a model with bad quality data, in which case it is also going to give us bad quality results. And there are some other related problems, such as if we are using reinforcement learning agents, maybe an automated cleaning robot, then that robot may decide to break something so it can clean it up and get more points. So this is what we call reward hacking, and again, these are pretty well-known issues. But how does this mean anything for security? Well, first of all, we have to consider the possibility that somebody is using AI maliciously for malicious goals. And there are many documented instances of AI being used for social engineering. One example of this is the so-called deepfake, when an attacker creates a fake representation of the audio or video of a real person and makes it look very realistic with the help of AI, and this could be used to carry out all kinds of social engineering attacks. But we also have denial of information, when the attacker floods a platform with a lot of fake information, and the users of that platform will not be able to tell which piece of information is real, which is genuine, and which is fake. But let's talk more about the technical aspect, because AI can also be used to help cyber criminals in spreading malware. There have been recent studies on this as well, and it is much easier to create polymorphic malware that is harder to recognize and harder to find by security software than before. And furthermore, there was also a demonstration, and this is not new, this was done 5 years ago, of a security researcher who has created a system called Deep Exploit that could be taught how to exploit certain vulnerabilities in a sort of test environment, and then use that knowledge to attack real targets out there in the real world. But let's go a little bit further than that. Let's say that we have some sort of AI system which is used for, let's say, a self-driving car, figuring out what kind of road sign it can see on the road, or maybe some sort of image recognition system, such as a security camera. What will happen if an attacker can come up with some sort of magical picture, and if they put that picture on themselves, then suddenly this system will fail to recognize them as a person. That is the first example you can see on the left, which is again not exactly a new attack. This particular example was from 2019, and basically when a researcher wears that particular picture that you can see, they become invisible to the security cameras. But let's say that we have, again, some sort of security system which tries to identify potential threats. You can see an example on the right, when some researchers managed to come up with an object which is basically a turtle. I mean, to a human, it looks like a turtle that they used a 3D printer to produce. And when this object was put in view of this camera, which was trying to do image recognition to figure out what kind of shape was on the image, it would see it as a rifle basically almost all the time. And I don't think I need to tell you what kind of bad consequences could come from this. And well, there are many other examples of like somebody could make a stop sign look like a speed limit sign instead to a car, leading to a pretty bad traffic accident. And unfortunately, the story still doesn't end there, because attackers can also corrupt or repurpose AI that exists in the real world to fit their own designs. And perhaps the clearest example of this was an AI chatbot developed by Microsoft in 2016, which was called Tay. And originally this was intended to be an interactive chatbot on Twitter, which would respond to messages and also participate in conversations and teach itself based on what other people were saying. Unfortunately, from the time of its launch, when it was still behaving innocently, it only took a few hours when a group of dedicated internet trolls managed to completely corrupt its behavior and made it behave in an unacceptable, racist and hateful manner. And there was no real way to fix this situation. The only thing Microsoft could do was just to take it offline completely. But in a more modern sense, if you think about these large language models or LLMs, those can also potentially be poisoned in this way to behave badly to their users. For example, there is a problem of hallucinations, which is when we ask a question to an LLM, it is going to give us an answer which may contain parts that are fabricated by the AI so that the message fits the expectation of the user who was asking the question. And let's say that we ask an AI to write some code for us, and it is going to include references to a dependency, a library that doesn't actually exist. So a so-called phantom dependency. And if somebody just takes this code and tries to implement it on their own, then now their code has a reference to this non-existent dependency as well. And attackers can exploit it because they will know what the name is of this particular dependency and just create a package with the same name in whatever programming language we are talking about, NPM or the Python package repository, whatever. And the next time the victim tries to use that code, it will download the package from that particular public repository and the attacker's code will be inside. And another example is using some sort of code assistance tool, and there are quite a few of them. In this example, we can see Copilot, where we have some autocomplete functionality. The programmer starts writing some code, and this tool helps fill it out. And unfortunately, if the attacker is crafty enough, they can put in some comments which contain some malicious code. And these AI systems can interpret those comments as actually part of the real code of the program and will happily offer up this malicious little piece of code that you see here, which is going to delete everything from the file system the next time the developer wants to write a function that tries to check whether the current user is an admin or not, as you can see on this picture on the right. And this is just one example of many in how these kinds of systems could be potentially abused. So, we have seen some examples from the real world about how AIs can be broken, how they can be attacked, how can they be abused. But why is this? What are the reasons? That is basically what we are going to be discussing next in the next video. And we are going to be looking at the various ways that attackers can realize these attacks and why they are realistic attacks and not just theoretical. So, see you until next time, and then we are going to be talking about 100 ways to wreck your AI.